Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is March 22nd, 2019, and this is episode 130. Politicos is the BC Politics podcast. How long has it been since you've been on the podcast?
I don't know.
So I looked it up. You first appeared on episode 38. So this nearly 100 episode. I think 98, 97, something like that. When you came on to talk about the book before it was finished, or just as you were finishing it up.
Wow.
So welcome back to the podcast, David Moscrop.
So nice to be back.
We're recording live from Big Rock Urban because that's the only way we could make this work, and we wanted to drink while we record. So forgive the background noise as we go. It's going to be a little bit more of a impromptu episode. I'm Ian Bushfield.
And I'm Scott Glaneboom.
On today's show, David, you're going to talk to us about your new book. We're going to talk about the federal budget, but I think that got distracted by the SNC Lavalin affair, which we're going to keep talking about. First, as always, remember to check out BC Today. It's way too noisy in here for me to give them their full plug, so go to BritishColumbiaToday.ca, sign up for a free 2-week trial, and get some written content. That's very good.
Yeah, I like them.
Very good.
They're great.
And make sure to use the offer code CITIZEN when you do.
Yes, so Allison knows that you came from us. All right, Too Dumb for Democracy. We've talked about this before when you were sort of thinking about your book, but now the book exists and it's out there. I've made it through the preface and the introduction, which I highly recommend those two sections. At least I can't speak to the rest of it.
The rest of it's pretty decent too.
Thank you.
The spoiler, though, I guess, is that we're not too dumb for democracy, in your opinion, but your whole take is largely around political decision making and avoiding bad political decisions. So what to you is a bad political decision, and isn't it just something you disagree with?
Yes. A bad political decision is any decision that you don't like. And that's the book, ladies and gentlemen.
Short book.
Very short book, yes. It's a pop-up book. The temptation is to say, and in strategic politics we often say, a bad political decision is any decision I don't like. The problem with that is, someone comes along and says, well, I like it, and then there's nowhere to go from there. So we might not be able to agree on outcome when it comes to political decisions, but we can agree on process. And this is, we can agree on some rules of the game, and we can agree on standards. And what I'm trying to do in the book is set a standard by saying, no, a good political decision is rational and autonomous. It's the product of collecting information about the world that's accurate, that's coherent, that you can share with someone else. And it's the product of reasons that you can provide that are not the product of self-delusion or lies, that someone else can recognize as reasons. And I've adapted that from democratic deliberation theory.
Okay, that's great. Does anyone actually do that, though, is the real question.
Well, sometimes. And, there are individuals who are more or less predisposed to that. And there are institutions that make it more or less likely that sure will behave that way. So, I backstop the argument with recommendations for personal practices that individuals can adopt if they want to do better, but also institutional redesigns and outlets to encourage that. So, the Supreme Court is a deliberative body. It is a highly deliberative body. It might be the ultimate deliberative body. The Senate is more deliberative than the House. Everything's more deliberative than Twitter. And
But all people do is talk on Twitter.
It's true. It's a lot of everyday political talk, not a lot of deliberation, some deliberation.
Right.
But so this is a program for introducing more deliberation into our political institutions and everyday lives.
So you were in BC when we were talking to you last, and you're in Ottawa now. So you follow politics sort of as obsessively as we do. So you see this firsthand in a lot of different situations. You were here for the Clark government. You were here for the start of the Horgan government. You were there for the Ford government and Trudeau in Ottawa. They give you lots of practical examples. So Maybe let's start here in BC. I know one of the things you were following really closely was the electoral reform referendum. Was that a good or bad approach on your metrics, David? Knowing I already know the answer.
What the listeners can't see is me turtling, trying to crawl into a fetal position. I was very frustrated by that process. As someone who is a strong proponent of participatory democracy, I am very quick to point out there are better and worse forms of that, and referendums are on the worst side of the spectrum. If you're going to do them, there are ways to make them more productive. We saw none of that in the provincial referendum. And a lot of folks, including myself, tried to argue that there were better ways to do this, and we weren't listened to for whatever reason. So a referendum encourages yes, no, strategic politics, spending as much as you can to mobilize, misleading if you have to mislead. We saw plenty of that. I think the no side was a bigger offender, but I saw it on the yes side too. And no real reliable heuristic, mental shortcut that you could adopt. Compare that to 2003 to 2005, where you had a citizens' assembly, lots of time, lots of money. 57.7% of people said yes. And it was salient because there had been some wacky elections previously. And so that was the recent referendum was a good example of how not to do these things.
And if we're going to do it better?
Well, have a citizens' assembly. Let them pick. One question. Simple majority. I happen to support regional thresholds. We can get into that. I don't like mail-in ballots. I would prefer that it was held alongside a general election, for instance.
Like a municipal election that was happened to coincide.
Yeah, municipal would have been fine too because they were province-wide.
Maybe more people would vote in many of the municipalities across the province in that
Yeah,
case.
well, exactly. And make sure you've got a lot of time to get into this, and that there's lots of funding for civic education around it too. You know, we just didn't see that, not anywhere near what we needed to see in here's the thing, I think it deserved to lose. You know, as someone who supported it, defended it until I left, and then I mostly stayed out of it, I would rather, this is why I might never make it as a politician, I would rather not get what I wanted than get it the wrong way.
So that was one of the bad decision-making things. We've also seen the BC NDP, especially in the early days, got criticized for all the consultations they were doing. Whereas on the other side, I guess, over in Ontario, Doug Ford's been kind of the bull in the china shop running around and, not necessarily, depending on your point of view, either correcting everything or destroying everything. Are there things that you take from either of those governments? Maybe there are some things that Ford is doing good, and that was definitely something Oregon did bad.
Yeah, I think consultations are fine. I worry that they're a tool for democracy washing. So we're like, oh, we talked to folks. I mean, we saw that federally in 2015 with the electoral reform efforts, 2015-2016. That was remarkably cynical. And they can be used to stall. Consultations can be gamed. It's not a representative sample. So they're fine, but they're not sufficient. One of the things I look at when I look at a good process is it representative? Is that sample representative of broader population? Are governments going to listen, or is it democracy washing? We talk to people, but we're going to do anything we want anyway. Is it deliberative? Reason-based, reason-giving based, and outside of it, do people have the chance to set the political agenda? So it's not enough to just say, well, we talked to folks about this policy, or to say, well, we have free, fair, regular elections. Well, can citizens set the agenda outside of consultation so that the things that they're consulting on in the first place are things they want to talk about? Or is it the same old folks, deciding not just what we get, but what we get to even think about getting in the first place? So, Ford, I think, there's nothing about the Ford government I like. Full stop. I have nothing left. It is one of the most atrocious governments I've seen in my life. The NDP might have been a little bit gun shy in the early days, and so they wanted to make sure they were talking to everyone because they didn't want the government to fall, because they hadn't been in power for 15, 16 years, whatever it was. They were trying to build support, but there is such a thing as too much consultation.
Well, on that vein, something that you often see a lot here is that locally, whenever there's a consultation, it tends to be a bunch of old white people and very unrepresented. And a large amount of that is the fact that if you have time to track down and sit for like 4 hours at a public hearing, you're probably, demographically speaking, wealthier, older. How do you actually improve that?
Well, so I argue in the book for citizens' assemblies and participatory budgeting exercises that are backed by resource transfers to make sure that anyone who wants to can participate, and by sortition, ideally, with sort of the random drawing of lots to determine who gets to show up. That way you get a representative sample. Now you can build that sample ahead of time based on criteria if you think those criteria are valid. So you might say, look, we want to focus on this neighborhood because we think these folks are going to be effective. Or you say, it's a province-wide thing, we want to make sure that we have equal gender representation, or representation across ridings, or indigenous representation, or whatever it may be. But you control for that at the outset in a transparent way. Instead of saying, well, we consulted, and if someone comes along and says, well, break down for me the demographics of that consultation, and the answer is, well, I don't know, whoever showed up. Right? So you can control for that, which I think is valuable because, again, what you don't want to do with participatory democracy is reproduce existing inequities and inequalities in that process, because that's not better. Those are old problems.
So this is the jury duty approach to democracy without the sort of Colton Boushey murder trial. He wasn't on murder. Gerald Stanley murder trial.
There's no peremptory challenges.
Kind of,
Right? It's not like the government can't say, no. We've got our law, we've sorted these folks in, and then say, no, except for that one and that one and that one. You got to take who shows up.
So, where is this working well?
Well, it's...
And I think I asked you this last time.
Participatory budgeting and deliberative citizens' assemblies are used ad hoc around the world. There are just dozens and dozens and dozens of examples. And if you go to participedia.net, maybe .org, but I think it's net, that's a project, an academic project that's a co-partnership with a number of people, and that is a listing of all of these participatory exercises around the world.
It is .net.
.net. Okay, good. And my supervisor at UBC, my former supervisor Mark Warren, is a part of that, as well as some colleagues. And they'll go through the many, many, many examples. Now, some of the ones I like to draw on, Porto Alegre sort of shepherded in the modern version of participatory budgeting, Porto Alegre in Brazil. The Citizens Assembly in British Columbia on electoral reform, 2005. In Belgium, they had the G1000, which is where they got 1,000 folks together, which is actually about 700 and change, but which is pretty good. To sort of agenda set for policy around the European Union. Those were ad hoc. My argument is that we should take these and build them in institutionally, routinely. Not for everything, because no one has, who's got the time?
Right.
But make them a normal part of democratic participation in Canada.
How much would that cost?
I have no idea, but I also don't care. It would. Andrew Scheer pulled that stunt the other day where he had. You'll talk about the budget soon. The House of Commons voting overnight on on estimates.
Line by line.
Yeah, line by line, like 270
votes.
Yeah.
Confidence votes.
Yeah, and that cost $600,000, I think. can get better value for money with a citizens' assembly, even if it costs a few million, right? Put it this way, compared to other items in the budget, it's peanuts.
Okay, so let's say everyone reads this book, which I'm sure they will, and
36 million copies to be sold.
Yeah. But
is it available worldwide?
It is so far only in Canada, but
Okay.
we're working on it.
all right,
Every
we'll
man,
smuggle
woman,
a few
child.
down
Yeah.
to the States.
Yeah.
But what's the incentive if policymakers look through this for them to actually implement it? Because
Yeah.
they certainly benefit quite a bit from the current system.
I have met very few politicians who are very keen to get rid of their power, to sort of redistribute their power. They fight their entire lives to get it. They don't really want to turn around and say, okay, now you have it. I am hoping that they will realize that, and I know some of them listen to this, that it is in their enlightened self-interest to adopt these things. Now, for one, I think it's an ethical imperative, but also I think it's good politics because people like this stuff. And I'm not suggesting that we make everyone a full-time politician. I'm saying build a little bit of this into our day-to-day politics. It builds trust. It produces good outcomes. It agenda sets so that folks get a little bit more of what they want, which contributes to the long-term viability of democracy. I mean, this whole book is written, alongside the premise that democracy is in trouble globally, historically fragile, and could be lost. And so we'd better double down on it now, rather than waiting until we get to a crisis point. So there's both good ethical, moral reasons, right? But there's also good self-interested reasons too.
Okay, so those are the challenges with getting politicians to go for this.
Yeah, that's the easy one.
But what about people in general? For this podcast, I spend several hours a week reading what's going on, and even I don't feel fully informed.
No.
So how do you get everyone up to the point where they can participate and make those rational decisions you talk about in the book?
I have never met an apathetic person in my life when it comes to politics. I have met countless people who are alienated. No one who is apathetic, by which I mean if you sit down with someone, anyone, even you're the least political person you know, and you say, are you interested in politics? They might say, no, I got things going on. Then you say, okay, fine. Do you care about taxes? Do you care about roads? Do you care about schools? Do you care about healthcare? Do you care about X, Y, Z? Well, they do, right? And they have preferences. Now, those might be well constructed or not, but those people are political. When you scratch the surface. I'm trying to make the case that a little bit of work goes a long way when you want to be able to form more resilient, coherent preferences. And I find that when people dial in a little bit, because I've read and thought about this a ton, they get kind of interested, right? They recognize that people want to do fairly well. They don't want to be, in a sort of immediate cognitive sense, we self-delude all the time. People don't love the idea of being self-deluded, though. So there is that incentive too. And the other incentive is that we when you give people ownership over their democracy, they tend to use it fairly responsibly if you get the incentives right and the institutions right. So I think since it's a fairly modest proposal, and you can also, well, of course, make the argument to them that you make to politicians that you want this long term. Because one of the scary things is a lot of folks will say the equivalent of, I just want good outcomes, right? They don't really care about process.
Right.
Yes, good things are much more popular than bad things.
Wildly. And, there was a Pew study years ago, I talked about it in the book. They asked folks, okay, do you like democracy? Do you like autocracy? Do you like military rule? When it came down to democracy versus technocracy, rule by experts, 50-50. 50% of people were fine with technocracy, which is scary, because they want results. So we've got to come back to convincing people that democracy is good because it produces good results, but it also gives people control over the agenda and it ensures accountability. And I think that's an argument people pick up on.
Well, the challenge people have sort of run into, and I think this is where the book is so important right now, is democracy has become less about what you're talking about, what we think about this, people coming together to develop policy that governs each other, and more about partisanship. And more about, it's my team versus your team, especially like you look at the states, and that's literally all it is. Yeah. You're either Hillary or Trump, or even within the Democrats, you're Bernie or bust or whatever.
Not only that, like people will change what they purport to believe based on whether the party changes positions.
And what this book and this kind of approach challenges us to do is to stop thinking with that fast lizard brain and slow it down, break things down. Was it Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, the higher level reasoning, and really draw
System
that
2.
out. System 2.
Yeah. Get off cognitive autopilot.
Get off Twitter.
Well,
obviously.
No, but it's true. And as Scott says, people will pick their party or their politician first, and then adjust their preference to that, which is bass backwards, as they say, right? It makes no sense unless you realize that a lot of our politics are tribal in the sense that people want to be a part of a team. And that speaks to the need for having a community and having a group, right? Which is important. So I'm not against that. I mean, I'm not against partisanship. I'm not against folks having groups. There are better or worse ways to do it.
Well, I imagine the question or the thought going around every person who's written a book's mind is, what's going to be the next book?
I'm writing about the end of the world.
End of the world. Will it be done first?
Well, the good news is that either way, it works out.
Yeah.
It's a self-correcting world.
What's the biggest threat to the world you're looking at? Is it asteroids? Is it Trump? Is it nuclear war? Or is it just
AI,
all of them?
It's all of that. I mean, it really is an assessment of the ways that we could come into very, very serious trouble. Not, in a very non-melodramatic level way. I mean, what I'm trying to do is sort of a threat assessment, but an expressly political one. It's not disaster porn, which a lot of these books tend to be, right? It's a political assessment, because that's sort of where my brain goes to, and I promise it'll be uplifting a little bit.
I put the question in here.
End of the world book.
Was that?
A cheery end of the world book.
Well, cheerier than some.
I put the question in here mostly as a joke, but apparently you do have a book in the works.
Yeah, I've got a book proposal that's almost ready.
Well,
They don't let you stop once you start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So where can people who want to read Too Dumb for Democracy find it?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that you can find it wherever books are sold, nationwide, and on the internet at any of your favorite online retailers. Yeah. Although I will say this, I would encourage you, if possible, to support your local independent booksellers.
Of course. And where can they find you when they want more random tweets?
Oh my lord. Well, on Twitter at David_Moscrop. And my email, I'm very happy to take emails, david.moscrop, MOSCROP, @gmail.com.
Moving on to segment 2, what budget? This Tuesday, the federal government released their long-awaited pre-election budget.
Well, they have to do it eventually.
Yes.
And they almost didn't get to because the Conservatives were up to hijinks, but maybe we'll save that for the next segment when we talk about hijinks. Was there anything good in this budget, Scott?
There's okay stuff, like a lot of, different things are getting a little more money, a pre-election, sprinkled goodies everywhere sort of budget. There isn't really kind of one signature standout thing which the government can then spend the next 4 months talking about before the campaign platform starts to take shape.
So I saw someone suggest that the government had gone out of its way to run a deficit. Well, they had really tried hard, and it, in a sense, forces Andrew Scheer and perhaps Jagmeet Singh to run on cuts. And so the point was, I think the implication was the point is not to have a big ticket item, you spread it out across demographic groups, some money for older folks, some money for young folks, for housing, et cetera, and then to say, okay, what are you going to cut?
Well, that was definitely the message: is elect us or this all goes away.
Yeah, everybody gets a little something.
Because the deficit wasn't huge. It's still around 10 billion. It's where it's been for most of the liberal regime.
Yeah.
And they still have that like 3 to 4 year like tapering it down. It's not the out of control deficits that anyone is screaming about, except conservative, like, you know, those deep conservative, we can't have deficits under any costs.
I'm with Kevin Milligan on this. You know, the debt to GDP ratio is fine. I can't remember if it was him or it was someone else who raised the point that even historically speaking, when you look at 2008, give or take, even if that were to happen again, it wouldn't be catastrophic. That, you know, the fundamentals are so good that there's room to do this. That it's not the structural deficits of the 1990s, you know, the programmatic,
80s, 90s.
the 80s and 90s that peaked, I guess, in the leading up to the budget in '95. So it seems to me like the Liberals are sort of playing cutesy with an election year budget without being revolutionary, which sounds to me like the Liberals. You know, it doesn't sound extraordinary.
So it seems like the demographics they're really trying to go after. I mean, seniors are in there because seniors are always in a budget because they vote. But I heard it phrased on one other podcast as millennials because there's housing, there's some pharmacare which helps both young and old alike, and training benefits like ability to go into new projects. Housing, Scott, you probably have very strong opinions here.
Yeah, so the top line item here is the government will now own part of your home. Or at least...
But not 100%, so it's not a good socialist budget.
Of course, that would be your take on it. So they've introduced this new home buyers incentive where CMHC will pay up to 5% on any insured mortgage or 10% if it's for a new home. But that's capped at incomes of $120,000, which, like in Vancouver, where we're sitting right now, that's a pretty narrow band of has under $120,000, but can't afford a place.
Well, they capped the value of the home too, didn't they?
I think
it was like a $400,000. There was a cap.
Well, like what you can qualify for a mortgage under 120K income.
Yeah.
So my combined household income is under 120K. We just essentially closed our sale in January, but we'd pre-bought like 2 or 3 years ago when it was not unaffordable.
Right.
So, fuck, this is like 6 months too late. Because otherwise I would have gotten that money. I mean, we clearly didn't need it.
You could have hosted, and when the ministers come to town, you could host them in their homes because they would own it, right?
I mean, it's a condo, not a full home because it's Metro van, right? No one's buying houses.
Yeah. Well, I live in Ottawa now, so I own several homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the price of what you were renting.
That's
just
right.
Small
no, I'm a very proud renter.
But obviously, like, this is frustrating for any of us who live in Vancouver or Toronto, where the housing markets are still so hot that no one can dream of home ownership.
Yeah, it's a pretty narrow band, and like 120K, like that seems like a lot, and like it's higher than the median income, but you have 2 professionals, even at the start of their career in a household, you can hit that level pretty quick, but most homes are still out of price range for you, so that's not helping. Well, also, like, this is only for a CMHC insured mortgage, so that means if you have your 20% down payment or higher, you don't get any help there either.
Oh, maybe I wouldn't have got it then. Oh, I also have that like very stereotypical millennial thing of like family help.
Yeah.
Not quite the bank of mom, but in that realm.
But also, like, the big problem here is that what is the problem they're trying to solve? And the theory here is clearly that people don't have enough money.
Right.
And, you know, everyone would be nice if they had more money, but if the number of houses still isn't enough for everyone to live in a city, just injecting more money into it's only going to raise prices, and the real beneficiaries are the people who already own.
Yeah, we can keep incentivizing buying all we want. That worked really well for a long time in Canada when we could just continually build subdivisions everywhere. And this might help people in Ottawa, Winnipeg, some of the prairie cities where they are still expanding out to nowhere. But even
That has its limits.
Even Calgary and Edmonton, they're starting to feel the tension of being a sprawling metropolis where you're stuck in gridlock all the time.
Yeah, it's not very scalable, and what was I just saying?
Ottawa too.
Yeah.
Like
No LRT still. Well, some LRT, but
So
no
if
new
you can get to
LRT.
work in the
Speaking
snow,
of SNC.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. As long as you don't use it 9 months of the year.
sorry, it's not like Ottawa has any snow.
No. Famously snowless.
What was I just?
But the program's goal of incentivizing buying.
Which, that's the other thing is there a problem with the lack of home ownership in Canada? If you look at the statistics, it's what, like roughly 2/3 of Canadians households own a home. It's one of the highest in the world. You know, even among millennials, it's a pretty decent, like 40%. What is this? What is the real problem they're trying to solve here? And would it be better to have something that would say reduce rents, let the millennials in the expensive cities save up more money because they're not shelling out 40+% of their paycheck for a rent? That might help. And they do have a program in here where they're expanding some of their loans to rental developers, which will help a bit. But
Like one of the big criticisms from the left of housing policy over the last 15, 20 years has been the federal government walking away from it and building anything. Like the provincial and federal governments used to be heavily involved in social housing and these kind of programs. And this was an opportunity for progressive lefty Trudeau to want to reclaim that. I mean, Jagmeet Singh is running on the I want to build 500,000 homes. I still wonder if that's enough, but these are the kind of things I think people want to be looking for. Whether it's incentivizing building or just straight up building it, I almost don't care. Put some shovels in the ground, make them rentable, whatever.
yeah, and that's the other thing this doesn't help is it doesn't actually help getting shovels in the ground. And it's called the home buyer's incentive, and the theory it'll incentivize people to build, but at least here there's already a strong incentive, and the real stumbling block is municipalities don't want to allow it. Like you saw in North Vancouver, like they canceled a couple affordable housing projects, and there's no real stick in here to beat those municipalities with to actually get those projects approved.
We'll get to in the quick takes one thing the province is doing about that, but if you can't just give people discounts on houses, another way to help them afford a home is to help them get a better job. And the government's introduced a couple initiatives to try to, improve job training here. So there's a Canada training benefit, essentially money to help you go back to school, right?
Yeah, so it's $250 a year, lifetime cap of $5,000, and basically accrues, and you can use it at a specific post-secondary institution. So like my professional development hours I have to maintain do not get covered by this, which I'm a little annoyed about. But
this one I really don't get. It is so marginal. Unless these programs, I'm not an expert, are these programs already subsidized and this covers a part that's not? It seems like a pittance to me.
I know there's a few grants out there, and I've taken advantage of some for part-time student grants. And $250 a year is like half of a course.
Right. Okay.
We all have spent enough time in university, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, like I'm looking at taking the course I need to do to get my PMP, and it would be like half of the lifetime cap on it, just for that one course to get 35 hours of training.
So the country has two big problems when it comes to this. One is a lack of folks in skilled trades, and this isn't going to fix that. And the other is student debt levels, and this isn't going to fix that either.
Although they are cutting rates.
So,
Yeah,
that does
so-
help a bit.
aside, right? But
Yeah.
I'm saying is, there's no. I mean, for this specific policy.
Yeah.
So, so what is this really meant to do at that level?
I suppose it's like to affect the marginal person,
Right,
which,
okay. Which is
you know,
nothing wrong with
stuff
that.
happens on
There's
the
nothing wrong
margin,
with that.
but
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with
it's
that, but-
not a big deal once you actually start digging into it. And
Yeah.
you know, we might get 500. You know, it's probably not that. 100 more people going back to school or
Right.
something, maybe.
But it's worth talking about the student loan interest rate cut. The BC government just talked about how they are eliminating interest on student loans. And a lot of people said, that's great, but it's worth pointing out you still pay prime plus
Yeah.
X percent at the on your federal portion of the loan. Well, now you're only paying prime on your federal portion.
Yeah,
So
that's
they're
great.
cutting that, whatever it was, 2.5%.
That's great.
Which does save people some money. And here in BC, that will mean a lot for students who now are actually not paying that much interest on their loans. I mean, sitting on whatever, $40,000, $50,000 in loans that a lot of students leave university with
Yeah.
is still a stressful situation that they're going to work off. And even if all the interest was cut, I think the Wilkinson type seem to think that, you know, people will take out extra money, but there's something stressful about having $50K in loans when you have an annual income of like $30K while you're still in school or less, and then
Yeah.
so I think it's a good policy and
Yeah,
a
I
good
think
step.
so. I think it's great policy. Yeah, I've got no beef with that. That's
And it's surprisingly not expensive to cut these interest rates.
yeah.
Like BC's spending like $20 million a year once they've taken the initial hit.
Well, it's just 300 million. That's something.
Well, yeah, the first hit is bad, but it would look really bad to only apply it to future students.
Yeah.
So I'll give
Although
credit
there
to
is the
Trudeau.
argument that like if the people who already have student loans, like a lot of them are middle class professionals, and if you're spending money to subsidize education, is the people you should be subsidizing the middle class professionals with a
But they vote.
I'm for universality as,
I mean-
as a rule. This is my politics.
Yeah.
I'm for universality for a lot of different reasons. You know, it's efficient to administer it that way. It lessens the burden on individuals to figure it out. Also, it creates solidarity and support.
Well, speaking of universality, the federal government is taking the smallest of steps toward universal pharmacare.
God,
They-
I just
They have they're creating to be specific, they're creating a Canadian drug agency. I think everything in the budget was telegraphed in advance with regards to pharmacare, I think.
Yeah.
The drug agency will basically help negotiate better bulk buying prices. There's going to be there was a new word I learned that I didn't actually put in our notes, but it'll create a standardized list of evidence-based drugs. Sounds like a good thing. And they're throwing a whole bunch of money, $500 million a year, at rare disease drugs, which
That's great.
anyone who has a rare disease is generally paying a lot for those drugs because they're very expensive to study because few people have that disease, and pharma companies don't make a lot, so they cost a lot. So helping those people is generally a good thing.
I'm all for it. I have nothing else. I mean, you know, being the lefty that I am, I always wish it was more money, but there's nothing wrong with that. The drug agency is a different. You know, there's more to come on this. This is what gets me is that, you know, back in think of the Pearson government.
Which we all remember well.
Back in my day when Pearson was prime minister, you know, that was a fairly short-lived series of minority governments. And that was CPP, the flag, Medicare. Got a lot done in a short amount of time. And the new strategy is to drag this stuff out over years and years and years and years. So, I mean, I understand that things need to be, you know, built over time. This seems to me irritatingly modest and slow. And a reminder that there's an election and the Liberals will have more to say about this in the fall.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one place where the NDP is planning to fight them hard on.
Yeah.
Or at least I hope. I'll be very disappointed if
I don't know what else they got.
500,000 houses.
No, but I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I think the NDP will just say, look, we want universal pharmacare, and it's styled in the version of the national healthcare scheme standards, I should say, and the provincial schemes, the insurance schemes, and anything else is unacceptable. Instead of this, because one of my worry is that we'll end up with the OHIP Plus style that Ontario experimented with, which is we'll top up plans for these folks and those folks. But again, universality is more effective and I think more just.
Well, speaking of CPP, they're throwing a bunch of money at seniors as well, and one of those changes is they're automatically enrolling everyone in their CPP payouts, which cool, I guess.
You don't automatically get your CPP back right now?
So
This seems like one of those that's not already the case. I mean, I'm not obviously getting my...
Budget 2019 proposes to proactively enroll CPP contributors who are 70 years or older in 2020, but have not yet applied for or received their retirement pension.
Oh, so because retirement right now is 65, so if for like 5 years you haven't been asking for your money back,
Yeah,
they're now just going to give everyone their money.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of universality, this seems like a good policy. Undoubtedly, there's going to be people who don't need it who get it, but simplicity kind of matters in some situations.
And they're making a few changes around the GIFs as well, the guaranteed income supplement. But overall, I mean, they're spending some more money on seniors, which is what's expected, and that's all I really have to say about that.
Fair enough. Well, I know I do have some opinions about the media section that was put in there.
Yes, because they apparently hate podcasts in Ottawa.
Yeah, we're not going to get to sell out. Jesse Brown obviously has the strongest of takes for this, and he feels very vindicated that the government was always stitching this up to support
legacy media,
Post Media and Globe and Mail and Torstar. And I was always kind of skeptical of his shtick on that because he always feels a bit hyperbolic on those, but it kind of feels like he wasn't wrong at this point, because the changes that have been telegraphed or announced in advance were that there were going to be these like two kinds of tax credits and this charitable status available for qualifying news agencies. And this was always going to be like organizations decided by a panel of esteemed journalists. Fine, I'm not really opposed to that. It's still like prefer.
Still a gatekeeping function there, which might not be great.
Sure, it kind of works though in the same way any other self-regulatory body like engineering or doctors do. So,
I mean, Bob Mackin isn't going to be getting money from this, so that's probably a plus. But still.
But where it came down is that
FOIs.
all
Who
these
will do all the FOIs?
he can still do them.
He's doing them now without government funding.
Yeah, no one's in a rush to change FOI legislation. It turns out. The biggest kick in the pants, though, here is that they've restricted the qualified news organizations to ones producing written content, which, when we've had television for 60 years, radio for over 100?
Yeah, at least 100
and
now.
podcast for 10, which is just a version of radio, and like YouTube for 10. Like, this feels
I'd better
wrong.
stay out of this one.
Yeah,
No, give us your hot
No,
take.
I mean, I just don't think they have. Look, I have no problem with a system that helps support, among others, legacy media. That I support legacy media. I write for legacy media. I give comments for legacy media. I think the omission of new media, especially podcasts, is a glaring oversight and an indication that the government is 10 years behind on a changing media space.
Either that or very friendly with big established players in any industry.
Oh, there's some of that, yeah, but I mean, it wouldn't have taken that much money to include a slightly broader scope.
Yes, we're not asking for much money from the federal government.
But here's the thing. I mean, look, I've been doing this a pretty long time now. I've talked to a lot of people, media in Canada, media in the U.S., municipal media, provincial media, federal media, international media. I've done it all. I sit down to do this podcast. I sit down to do the Boys in Short Pants or whatever it may be. These are huge value-added podcasts that are getting a lot of information to people, and I love them. And, they ought to be given support because they're doing high-quality, substantive work. And I don't know if there's a minister in some office somewhere that hasn't got the memo, but it's irritating to me that that's the case. Anyway, I'm biased.
What this means for you patrons is you cannot write off your donations to us, but I hope you will continue to support us.
Me too.
Because you help make this work, and we are continuing to hope to make this a bigger, stronger thing.
Good.
And we won't be becoming a non-profit or charity anytime soon. Not that that was necessarily in the plans, but it's definitely not in the plans now. Unless we start producing a lot of written content. Which, like Jesse Brown points out, legacy media that run podcasts can essentially...
Yeah, that money can be directed towards their podcasts.
Yeah,
right?
well, like anything, all the money goes into one slush, and you just...
Yeah.
Like
fungible.
Turns out. But Scott, you found a couple other things you wanted to shout out in this budget.
Yeah, so they're spending $2.2 billion on a municipal infrastructure top-up, which is basically, we have some extra money, here municipalities, take it. Oh, and it's probably good politics too, because, now all the mayors are talking up this money that they're getting from Ottawa and what they can do with it.
Did they specify specific projects for those?
Nope.
Okay, so UBC SkyTrain may be in the running.
In theory, yes.
It could be. I mean, anything could be. Maybe fixing Ottawa's transit could get all $2 billion. There's also this EV, electric vehicle rebate.
Yeah, so they're giving a $5,000 rebate for electric vehicles under $45,000. So
which there are not many. There's a few, but
I think it's 19 of the 40 on the market, or 8 of the 40 on the market, I think qualify.
Yeah, I saw one very anti-Trudeau article complaining about this rebate, but it.
If they didn't put that cap on there, it would be called the Tesla rebate. It's not like the luxury
what
car.
they were pointing out is the base model of the Nissan Leaf, which no one thinks of as a luxury electric vehicle. It starts at $40,000, and so some of the mid-level ones are still cutting that. But maybe this is the kind of article that basically compared this Trudeau to this Trudeau Senior, who it pointed out was the only prime minister to invoke the War Measures Act and be super punitive against it was a weird article. I don't know why it showed up in my
I'm not sure what
newsfeed.
War Measures Act has to do with electric vehicles.
It was just highlighting the...
But hey, at least this is legacy media that's now getting government funding to do that.
No, this was some blog.
Oh, okay.
The other thing that was a little bit disappointing was the good side was there's a pledge to get high-speed internet to all Canadians, but this wasn't very ambitious as far as I could tell. What was the date they hoped to do this by? 2030, roughly? I remember seeing it. I think the date was 2030. It might be 2025, but no. It's not soon, and it's sad. This should not be hard.
Do we have much else to say on it?
But
so, overall takes on the budget. Good, bad, meh?
I mean, it's kind of pre-election budget where you sprinkle little bits all over, but I mean, honestly, this whole thing, even though we spent 20 plus minutes talking about this, is really overwhelmed by the ongoing dramas, and there's nothing in here to distract from that.
No, there really isn't. Which brings us on to our third segment. We're not done talking about SNC Lavalin. So, the talk of Ottawa and the bubble that follows it on Monday, before this came out, was will Trudeau finally manage to change the channel on the 40-plus day scandal? And so far it seems no.
I put about 8 different bullet points of just chronological events that have happened. March 18th, Michael Wernick resigns. The clerk of the Privy Council office, the Canada's highest
And receiver of mean
bureaucrat.
tweets.
But he didn't just he didn't resign in a Jerry Butts way to try to, stem the tide of the controversy. He resigned because, quote, "It is now apparent that there is no path for me to have a relationship of mutual trust and respect with the leaders of the opposition parties." Essentially, he said, other people think I'm not nonpartisan enough for me to do my job, which includes judging threats to the election during the election. Because, frankly, everyone's kind of pointed out all his testimony has been hyper-partisan.
Elizabeth May pointed out that he's not a partisan in the sense that he was a lifelong liberal. He's a partisan in the sense that he's a partisan for whomever's in office, which is also a problem.
Yeah.
And look, I think as soon as I saw his testimony, I started getting messages and had some exchanges. Everyone I talked to was like, "That's it, he's done. He's not going to last a month." And I don't know if the Prime Minister's office says he jumped. He wasn't. He wasn't
Pushed.
And I think that's probably true. He did the right thing. And good. We'll move on.
Well, it was ultimately untenable because, as you mentioned, he had the job of basically going to all the parties, should there be foreign interference in election, and saying, "Shit, guys, we have a problem here." And if the Liberals are the only one who trust him to say that, that's not a tenable position to be in an election.
Yep.
And if he supports he doesn't. He supports the government, but there's no government during the election. It's complicated. Yeah.
But so this is resignation number 4 in what several people have told me is a nothing burger of a scandal.
We also had this week a cabinet shuffle, although
Is it the shuffle of this one person?
yeah, I feel like it's just sliding a card into the deck or something like that. But local MP and my former member of Parliament, Joyce Murray, before I moved, she didn't get resigned.
Also, my former too, before I moved.
Mine as well.
She is now president of the Treasury Board,
100%.
which is a pretty big jump for her from backbench.
No, she was Parlsec.
Okay, she did have a parliamentary secretary role.
Yeah, which explains it. I mean, it was a conservative move for someone who used to be sort of a maverick and had really fallen into line in recent years, who had experience in the Parlsec. I mean, the government was, I know this for a fact, very concerned about continuity and competence at Treasury. In fact, that's in part what generated this whole mess. So when Philpott moved to Treasury. So it makes sense that she was chosen. I'm not a big fan of hers, but I think she'll be a perfectly competent minister at Treasury. So that was probably a very smart choice, all in all.
Yeah. I mean, even though she continually introduced the Naturopathy Awareness Week, and that was like the biggest thing that I've got frustrated at her for, because she's the most stereotypically Vancouver liberal. But honestly, she'll, like you say, I think she is a smart person who's a competent politician. Yeah. She ran for leader and did pretty well, but she ran on that, like, similar to Nathan Cullen, the, like, let's cooperate with other progressive parties kind of platform that I'm always skeptical of. But I know a lot of people who respect her, and I think she'll do well there, at least until the election.
Yeah.
But the less good news for the Liberals this week was that they decided that the Justice Committee had actually heard enough about this SNC thing, and they decided to move on to important work, I will say, about fighting anti-racism in light of the Christchurch shooting. Yeah. But
you can do two things at once.
Yeah.
They have resources, I can.
It turns out, yeah. But, well, they think they don't. So the Liberals killed the study of the SNC Lavalin. Randy Boissonneau, the Liberal, says, quote, "I think we heard clearly from representatives from all sides of this matter."
I have nothing but utter contempt for how Randy Boissonneau has comported himself during this process. That I watched all of the testimony, or I read some of it because some of it I missed from Joy Wilson Rainbow, because I had my media-only book launch and I heard testimony.
That was some bad plan.
It was, events, right?
Yeah.
Events. So there were some folks who really shined. Shone? What is the...
Say shined.
Who really stood out in that that process, and none of them were Liberals.
So this was done in a closed-door, in-camera meeting,
Yeah.
or at least it would have been if Liberal staffers hadn't circulated the contents of the motion to the press as the meeting was happening, which does make one wonder, is it really in camera?
Yeah, like I run a lot of meetings, and in camera is pretty clear. You don't talk about it.
You don't have your underlings like send press releases while you're in those meetings?
Yeah, that's not a good way to do an in-camera meeting. But I mean, I work in nonprofit. Maybe government is different. No.
I'm not. Again, it's a joke. And the ethics commissioner is, unfortunately, is ill and on medical leave. That process is going to take a long time. That body isn't sufficiently equipped to do the investigative work.
Also, their scope is very narrow.
Exactly. And the committee is now wrapping up. I just finished a piece about this yesterday that should be out in the next couple of days, and I was like, I don't know what keeps us in the news past June when the House rises. I do think this will disappear over the summer, and the Liberals will get what they want, which is let's adjudicate this during the election. And they'll say Harper's Party, Harper's Party, Harper's Party, jobs, 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 and that'll be that.
So
Well, people thought that was going to be the case this week too. Hasn't
yeah,
it?
Justin
So,
Ling has famously eaten his words.
that
This
this will
scandal will live and die in February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, Jody Wilson-Raybould did say she's going to give that committee another written statement as well as copies of the emails and texts she talked about. I don't know. Committees generally make their written submissions public. Does that mean hers will become?
Yeah, and so the chair of the committee, Anthony Housefather, has said that that will be translated and posted to the Justice Committee site in the next couple of days.
So that'll generate another round of news coverage.
Yeah, but again,
But the committee won't do anything.
but the committee won't take it up again because it's the same 5-4 problem as we discussed earlier, and that takes us again. The House rises in June.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that. And the other thing is this. I think, the number of folks who are paying attention to this has probably maxed.
Yeah.
And everyone's probably made up their mind. I don't think there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, wait and see more evidence. So I think we should have more evidence. I argue we should have an inquiry. But I don't think a lot of folks are going to change their minds. So I think this is baked in.
I think for the people who follow this closely, that's the case.
Yeah.
I think the people who don't pay attention to what's happening in Ottawa day in and day out, several months of Liberal scandal, just seeing that recurring
Yeah.
can have an effect.
Oh, it definitely can. But I mean, again, that is assuming it stays in the news for another half a year, which, the sponsorship scandal didn't. The sponsorship scandal did. It was a different beast. It was, I think, worse. And it stayed in the news because the Liberals decided to keep it in the news. The Paul Martin government launched the Gomery inquiry, and the Gomery inquiry kept it in the news throughout the election. And so, that was a choice that I think the Liberals have probably considered and decided that they aren't going to do it again.
I mean, they're not doing a great job of then turning the scandal off at all and shutting everything down.
Yeah.
They seem to be pretty incompetent at making this just go away.
Oh, I agree. But I mean, if you're them and you think, well, we're not going to kill it in February, we're not going to kill it in March, we might not even kill it in April, but I'll tell you, by June, we're going to it's off to the cottage.
But if there's an inquiry going on,
That'll
And there
definitely
won't
be
be.
worse for them.
And there won't be.
nevertheless, let's burn through.
Yeah, that was Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon was the introduction of the budget, or an attempt to introduce the budget, which most people did not hear.
Yeah, the Conservatives went to big effort to try to, as soon as they found out this Justice Committee wasn't going to continue hearing about SNC, they're like, all right, we're going to pull out all the stops to block the budget being introduced, which is, in terms of filibusters that are available in Canadian politics, one of the atomic bombs of last resort. We don't get a lot of filibusters, but I'm going to give credit to the Conservatives for pulling out the stops this week on it.
If there's a time to do it, this seems to be it.
So they tried to delay the budget. they failed inevitably on that. But then they did manage to force a line-by-line vote on the budget, which I think pulled, what was the total, like 30-hour vote, but that was spread over like Wednesday till Friday with just like line by line. Liberals had to be there for every line, enough to defeat conservatives.
Because this is a budget vote, those are all confidence votes. So the government just went through, I think it was 270 confidence votes. It was a lot.
Around that.
Yes.
And they won every one.
Almost. Maybe.
Yeah.
Asterisks.
We may never know for sure.
There was definitely at least one which I saw CBC talk about where Liberal MPs were a little bit late showing up to one of the votes, and a deputy speaker had to rule that, you know what, ultimately it's up to the honor of each individual MP to decide whether they were there legitimately or not.
As in, I, deputy speaker, don't want to be the one to force an early election on a technicality.
And I mean, Andrew Scheer was a former speaker, so I imagine he faced some of those challenging decisions. Maybe not quite this challenging.
I don't think quite that challenging. But what would have happened had the speaker ruled otherwise?
I think there would have been an immediate retesting of confidence. The Liberals would have won, and we would have all went back to our lives. I'm so irritated by that whole thing. It's such a stunt. Yeah, the Liberals should be dialed in and showing up and for their votes. They have a comfortable majority. Andrew Scheer, by the way, who skipped most of those votes and was probably comfortably asleep at Stornoway. So that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, because only the Liberals really had to show up in numbers.
Exactly.
So the opposition was just,
Confidence shouldn't be a gotcha moment. That's profoundly disappointing and contrary to the spirit of confidence. There's precedent for being able to immediately retest. They would have won. It's just.
Well,
Are you against filibusters then in general? Because I think there is like a value to that. Like they're definitely theater.
Yeah. So
but
here's the thing.
They're kind of an approach to like raise public consciousness
Yes.
of like, because it generates stories. Because the kind of people who follow Parliament closely notice that shit.
I agree, and I also think in a parliament in which the opposition has very limited tools to agenda set and to hold the government to account, I understand this. I understand why they do it, and that's fine. But the question of that's different than the question of whether or not the government has the confidence of the House, which to me, in my normative, this is how I think the world ought to be. This isn't constitutional reading. That's what Phil Lagasse is for. A great Twitter follow, an academic. The point of confidence for me is there an ongoing confidence in the House that the government has the support of the members? That isn't about whether or not some guy slips going into West Block and can't make the vote and the government falls. Because if the guy hadn't slipped, he would have showed up and voted yay. Or if someone wasn't in the can and didn't get past the curtain before the deputy speaker started reading the motion, that has nothing to do with whether the House that's a roll call issue, not whether or not, that's not an issue of whether or not the House has confidence in the government. So it's just, people look at that and see bullshit games, and I've got no time for it. But that's why I support filibustering, but not the gotcha.
Well, that's the thing is, I think the Conservative response has been, at best, tactically clever and strategically aimless.
That sounds like the party, yeah.
Yeah.
That
Especially under
right.
Scheer, yeah.
Yeah. Compared to the NDP, that is neither.
Well, I mean, the NDP has been clear that they're in support of a public inquiry because that seems like the best tool, whereas the Conservatives kind of thrown every possible answer, like RCMP investigation, even though that would be, RCMP investigation would only touch on criminal actions, which it's not clear anything has happened, even according to Jody Wilson-Raybould, which everyone has or all the partisan Liberals have said, she doesn't think anything criminal happened.
Which, it's not the standard, but and circling back to the Conservatives, I can't help but think if we had the top third in terms of intellectual and strategic talent in that race ended up in leader rather than who we got.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
We need a very special episode to go back to that.
Yeah, we would have had someone who would actually prosecute the public case against the government well, rather than having spent, the last 2 years turning everything into a giant, this is the worst thing ever, and now when there is legitimately a question of, has the government overstepped its constitutional limits in a big way? Who cares? Because Andrew Scheer's raised that same complaint about everything they've done.
It's a shame that Lisa Ray didn't win, is all I'm saying.
But maybe if she had the Bernier Freedom Conservative Party of Freedom would be doing a lot better. That's Derek Hildebrandt's Alberta Party, and it's not even quite, but just to run through a couple of highlights of this week, going back to the SNC case, Selena Caesar-Chavannes quit the Liberal caucus entirely, basically just saying she's become a distraction.
Yeah.
I think
that's a pretty big, although MP quits the Liberal caucus is itself a distraction.
I mean,
Was that all just this week?
So
yes.
She had
My
quit
Lord.
the parliamentary secretary role the previous week, and this week she decided to quit caucus itself. That was March 20th. Also the same day, the CEO of SNC Lavalin claimed the 9,000 job number that's been thrown around about why the government should offer this deferred prosecution agreement didn't come from them, which is what the government has been saying.
Yes.
So now this is a mystery number that just pooped out of nowhere.
Yeah, he pretty much explicitly said, they'll all get hired at other places. These are skilled engineers and the work is still there. So it just undercuts another level of the government here.
What's SNC's goal here?
I don't know.
I actually don't understand why he
might just
made
be,
this admission other than just because he could.
Well, look, Ian, sometimes you just say stuff and wait to see what happens.
Yeah, sometimes when you're a multinational CEO, you just don't
it's
give
just
a
you
fuck.
spin the wheel of destiny and see where
Since
it
the
lands.
scandal has broken, SNC has done some dirty stuff, but since February 7th when the scandal was broken, they've been pretty just we lobbied, we were clear about it, we said these things, we didn't say these things. And they've had decent PR, decent PR as you can for a company under criminal prosecution for buying the son of Gaddafi prostitutes.
Well,
it's as good a PR rollout as you can have.
Part of
under
the
that
thing
scenario.
they've been trying to play is this, the management has all changed since that. And so it's a different company turning a new leaf, and they're, trying to clean up things.
Previously it
And
was a
so-
coca leaf. Now it's
And
maple
so we
leaf.
also saw even Francois Legault coming out this week saying, you know what, the Quebec government would be willing to step in and help buy out as much as we need to make this happen. So SNC's been in a weird place. But the biggest story I think this week is Jane Philpott talking to Paul Wells for Maclean's yesterday, where she says,
That's only yesterday? Feels like a long week.
yep, the 21st. And it was yesterday morning, but there wasn't actually anything new in there. But she does say there's much more that needs to be told. And that was the headline that goes off there.
And she should be allowed to say it.
And she or Jody Wilson-Raybould should be allowed to say it. And we're all just kind of left going.
It breathed new life into the scandal, that's for sure. We're getting another
I
week
saw
of stories.
someone I saw a CBC piece describing it as blowing embers on the fire, but not throwing a new log on.
Yeah, it feels to me like a really shitty Samuel Beckett play. And sadly, at this time, I have to go do more book media. But I wanted to say thank you to both of you for having me on again and for the many years of support. And to listeners, give Politicoast your money and your love.
It's patreon.com/Politicoast.
Patreon.com/.
Yeah, I didn't say it at the start of the show.
Yeah.
Dave Moscrop, thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me again, guys.
All right, take care. Finally, moving into quick takes. BC released its poverty reduction plan, much anticipated, this week, and it was surprisingly not that great. It had been something the NDP had been really working at and promised a huge transformative kind of pitch on, and they spent a long time consulting on this. And when I went through the document, it really just read like a greatest hits of BC NDP, what we've gotten so far. Like, there was almost nothing new in this document. It talked about childcare announcement, which is a good thing to help reduce poverty. It talked about increasing disability and income assistance rates, which does help, although they haven't done enough. It even talked about reducing the tolls on the bridges to zero.
That is a bad take on the government's part.
I mean,
so obviously, if you're in poverty, paying for bridge tolls isn't great, but there's a bunch of other good policy outcomes that you get from bridge tolls, and you know what else bridge tolls give you? It's a bunch of money, which you can then use to alleviate poverty. Great in that you're just cutting tolls and now causing more congestion, encouraging sprawl. But at least you're saving poor and rich people alike some money. Is not a great anti-poverty strategy.
Bridge tolls were originally pitched as the way to pay for the bridge itself, but I'm not disagreeing with you.
If you want to redirect that money to poverty reduction, that's how you reduce poverty. You don't cut bridge tolls.
There were a couple new things in here. I think primarily it was funding for nonprofit dental services, which dentistry can be very expensive, and dental health affects all other health, and the fact it's not covered in Canadian healthcare is annoying and frustrating.
It's weird.
And if you're in poverty, you probably don't have dental coverage from an employer, so this is a good step. But like beyond that, I mean, I heard on the In the House podcast, the Rob Shaw, I think it's the province runs that, they talked about how the government was in this like bind of wanting to get this plan out, but also wanting to do a full consultation on it. But every time they came up with a good idea to stick in there, they went, well, why don't we just roll this out now, because it would be a great announcement. And so all the elements of it just came out, and it's that kind of more generous take on it than this is just a re-announcement plan. But it does legislate targets that the government reduce poverty, and I think that's good. And they're more importantly, it requires reports be tabled tracking poverty and showing us where we are, so we have evidence.
That's good, but like the binding targets aren't that binding because any future government can waive it, and like this is effectively a binding pledge to spend money, and well, in a budget bill that requirement just be zeroed out.
It's the left wing's version of a fixed budget or a balanced budget law. So, I mean, it's called Together BC, which continues the great trend of labeling everything something BC with like no space between them. So that's amusing, but
that's modern branding for you.
Honestly, I haven't seen a lot of the social service sector speak out for or against this, so the fact people aren't dramatically upset either means I missed it, and that might be possible, I've been very busy, or the NDP has actually done enough and talked to enough people that it's not a matter of they needed to do more, they just need to keep doing what they're doing. I think I was hoping for more. It does talk about the basic income pilot projects, which it's good to see they are pursuing.
Yeah, it is a pilot project, not a strategy.
And housing, of course, was a big part of it, but it also just emphasizes all the housing aspects they've already announced, essentially.
Yes.
But one new thing is over in Maple Ridge.
Yes. Well, this is a previously announced project of the temporary modular housing that is being rolled out across BC, except Maple Ridge wasn't going to be having any of that. So
the council there had been like in violent revolt against any social housing projects.
Yeah. So
and
there's
they're
a
like
homelessness
local
camp there that this project's being proposed for at that site, and they're basically in the process of evicting that camp. And
essentially, this project would allow you to move people from tents to homes, to 4 walls and a roof.
Yes. but the council wasn't having any of that. They denied the project. And then earlier this week, Minister Selena Robinson was basically saying, nope, we're going ahead anyway. This is going to get built. And that's that, which is entirely within the province's purview. Municipalities are creatures of the province, as the saying goes, and anything the province wants ultimately can happen.
I mean, the NDP are always going to be, and I mean, any government is always going to be hesitant to step on the feet of another government, even when they have the authority to.
And that's why I put this in the show notes, is because this is interesting and potentially a precedent. Because, as mentioned earlier, there are other municipalities that are in the process of denying a bunch of provincially funded social housing projects their approvals.
Like, ultimately, I think this was the right call for the province. Building modular homes when you have a city council that is basically saying, and I think the literal quote was, like, there's not enough people in these tents to merit one. They could just all go to Vancouver or something. Like, that's their philosophy to homelessness, is push them to Vancouver and let them deal with it. So,
which is part of the problem with municipal governments, is it's too constrained in its thinking and where it is. And I've long said housing policy needs to be higher than municipal levels, just because it does get too hyper-focused. It'll be interesting to see if this is the first step in a precedent, or if this is going to be a one-off.
I think provincial governments are still going to be very reticent to intervene.
Oh, this is definitely like the thin edge of the best case scenario for it.
Well, you even look at the previous Clark government, and the only times they really intervened was like when they dismissed the Vancouver School Board, and that generated a ton of controversy for them. Beyond that, the province, everyone wants to shirk decisions in politics, right? It's one of the problems. And here the government's actually willing to step up and say, no, this needs to be done. We'll take the flack for it if there's flack to be taken. Selena Robinson, I think, has had some protests outside her office for this, but you know what? Putting people in real homes, I think that's a price worth paying. And finally, next door to us in Alberta, the election has finally been called. Rachel Notley has said the Albertans will be going to the polls on April 16th. Alberta has kind of a weird fixed election date law where there's a window every 4 years where the premier gets the chance to call it within, and I think it's like within 3 months. So sometimes they give a throne speech, sometimes they give a throne speech and a budget, sometimes they could even give a throne speech, budget, pass a few bills, or they could do none of those. This time, Notley had suggested she was going to give a throne speech, do a budget, and pass a few bills, but then, lo and behold, right after her throne speech was through, she was like, no, writ is dropping and we're going to the polls.
Which kind of made sense when you look at what's happening with her main opponent, who is in the middle of a scandal surrounding kamikaze candidates. I haven't really followed this too closely, but from what I gather is there were basically candidates put into the United Conservative Party leadership race who weren't like serious candidates, but were just there to attack Brian Jean.
Yeah, so one of the guys who I think either dropped out or later didn't win has pretty much come out and said that was his purpose, but everyone else is denying it. But the RCMP are investigating it, and the campaign in general, which is not a good look for any party.
And I believe it's been verified that a bunch of the donations weren't done properly. Were basically
there was some corporate numbers that were transferring money when corporate donations were banned. Yeah,
basically money showed up in this guy's campaign, and there were people who said, no, I never donated to the. It's a mess. So if you're behind in the polls and your opponent is in the middle of a scandal, it's not the worst. If you don't expect to be ahead in the polls at any time soon, mid-scandal is a pretty decent time to call an election.
Yeah, Notley doesn't have a ton of paths to victory, so she may be taking advantage of this. She may have just been trying to catch them all on surprise, I mean, the Dave Berta podcast is what I've been listening to keep up with Alberta politics. The other thing that's just fascinating to me is this centrist always wants to be the new centrist thing brand in Alberta. That's the Alberta Party. Past guest of the show, Stephen Carter's been involved with them, and it's kind of shifted from a more like Alberta Liberal, which has moved to the left, and towards a more Alison Redford, Red Tory kind of party under him and former Progressive Conservative MLA Stephen Mandel's leadership as, you know, that Red Tory center-right kind of situation. They ran into a bunch of scandal when Stephen Mandel and 4 other candidates were deemed ineligible to run for this election because they'd previously misfiled paperwork. And that's embarrassing, but they went to the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench and appealed this, and essentially they were told, that's maybe too stiff of a fine to ban you from running. And so they're all now back in the race, but it was really embarrassing for the party for a while to have 5 of their star candidates disqualified from the election before it was even happened. So they're kind of the, like everyone who talks about, oh, the NDP is too radical and the UCP are too radical, wants to pretend they're Alberta Party supporters or are legit Alberta Party supporters, but then the party itself has this like inability to do basic paperwork. So that's not inspiring. And it'll be interesting to see where the rest of this election goes. It obviously impacts BC politics as we see where this reference case that's in court right now about not the Trans Mountain Pipeline, about whether BC can ban heavy bitumen going through the province, and just general Trans Mountain kind of conflicts between us and Alberta go. And this was when we had, you know, theoretically people on the same team wearing the same jersey in office. If you got Jason Kenney versus John Horgan, who knows where shit goes.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. If you're a first-time listener, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you think. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. If you have ideas for the show, feel free to send it to us. Our intro music credit is Beautiful British Columbia by Sergio Plotnikov, and the background music is whenever the Big Rock is playing when we're recording this.
I was going to say, we talk about Alberta politics. We're in Big Rock, the original craft brewery from Alberta.
Thanks for listening.